When I first came across Meta Knight on the SRB2 forums, I had a minor heart attack when I saw just how many abilities the guy had. Considering how I struggled to remember all the minor quirks and oddities of characters with just one or two moves, I was slightly overwhelmed by the concept of playing with a character with a grand total of 10 abilities, 11 if you count extra jumps as one. I think the mod pulls it off very well, but I think it's also clear Kibito made the mod for a different type of player. Let's jump into why. Because of how absurdly large Meta Knight's moveset is, I'm only going to be given a very quick explanation of each ability, instead of the analysis I usually do, and instead give my thoughts of the moveset as a whole at the end of this section. Ready? Let's begin. Meta Knight has 5 extra jumps after first jumping, but they're all really small and better suited to correcting jumps during platforming than actual vertical travel. He has better options for that anyway, as we'll get to later. His basic spin attack is a combo of 2 sword slashes before a final laser you can aim around yourself. Very good for the rare instances where there are large crowds of enemies, otherwise the first 2 strikes will kill most enemies anyway. Also not very useful for bosses because they're either in the air too much or the laser only counts as one attack anyway. Pressing custom 2 on the ground will cause Meta Knight to slide. Not exactly groundbreaking, but the amount of modded characters who overlook being able to get through these small gaps is ridiculous, so I'm glad for its inclusion. The Airslass. Like almost every other character who doesn't have a damaging jump, using spin in midair will cause you to temporarily become damaging. Despite how many attacks Meta Knight has, this is still going to be how you actually attack bosses because it's a reliable aerial move that doesn't require a charge up time. Press custom 2 in the air to perform a down thrust, pogoing on any enemies below you. This is the only other really feasible option to attack most of the bosses, but frankly, I was only using this mostly because of how fun it was to combo down thrusts onto hordes of enemies. Anyone who played Smash Bros. Ball is going to be cowering in their boots at the term Mach Tornado. It's a little less potent as an attack here, requiring you to charge it up first, but in any scenario where you can sit around for a second, it's very viable for both horizontal and vertical movement. Jumping after charging up a Mach Tornado will cancel it and instead store the energy inside your sword, causing the next attack to fire out a sword beam. I don't get the point of this, as it's far quicker and easier to just use that triple jab combo I mentioned earlier to fulfill the purpose of a ranged attack, but it is mostly harmless in its inclusion. Dash mode. You all know my opinion of it in a moveset that doesn't support it, but due to Meta Knight getting 2 new abilities during it that better suit the high speeds, I think it gets a pass in this specific case. While in dash mode, dash spin replaces the Airslass and down thrust, and is partially used to turn corners at high speeds. As an attack, it's not really any different than the moves it replaces, but I like that the developer decided to edit them to better fit the extreme speeds of dash mode, and it's part of the reason I think it actually does work well here. Want to go even faster while in dash mode? The dash lunge replaces the triple jab while in this state, and is a powerful forward thrust that will slightly increase your speed, but will also drop you out of the dash mode when over. However, it can be cancelled during its animation, keeping the speed but stopping you from slowing down, leading to a slight amount of risk and reward. It's the little subtleties that count. And finally, we have swimming. It's no different than Tails' equivalent, and I don't know whether Meta Knight can actually swim in the Kirby franchise, but I'll accept anything that will get me out of a Sonic water level. Deep Sea Zone is alright, but then Azure Temple is horrifying. So as you can see, Meta Knight has a lot of abilities. And sure, you can absolutely argue that a lot of these feel redundant. I'd actually agree with that viewpoint. But I think that in this particular case, the amount of moves available isn't actually too overwhelming. This might just be me, but I find it easier to remember a combo to perform an action than remembering what each individual button on a controller does, and I think Meta Knight uses a design philosophy that really resonates with that. Unlike a lot of other characters with stupidly large movesets, Meta Knight only uses about 3 buttons, with different contexts and charge times, and because every action is mapped to a logical combination, the down thrust is essentially done by jumping then using a duck, and the Mach Tornado, a more powerful sword attack, is done by holding down the button that corresponds to attacking. It's not too difficult to remember how each one is done. Compare that to a character like Super Mystic Sonic or Green Eyes, characters with large movesets who map each ability to a different button, and the difference is clear. Overall, Meta Knight is a very good moveset, at least in my opinion. It might not be to everyone's tastes, that's for sure, but I like it. I think the number of abilities doesn't actively harm the mod, and I don't really know enough about how Meta Knight works in the Kirby franchise to be able to critique how well they managed to distill the essence of how he plays into the moveset, so I can only look at it as a fairly robust and fleshed out concept standing on its own. Graphically, Meta Knight looks as good as you expect from one of the more serious SRB2 mods. Very detailed and appealing sprites that look pretty official. I've praised so many mods because of that, and it's gone to the point where that by itself isn't really enough to stand out. However, Meta Knight does have a few extra flourishes that gives a little extra boost to the rating. If you're the kind of person who likes customizing the colours of your characters, you have the ability to change the colour of your cape independently of your body, or remove it altogether, using the commands on screen. Meta Knight will also do a flyby the logo when you first boot up the game with him loaded, so all in all, Kabuto and their team really went the extra mile. As a whole, I think Meta Knight is really quite the standout mod. He doesn't have a lot of game-changing extras and details that some other modded characters have. Most of his moves feel like they could reasonably fit into the vanilla game instead of being wildcards that really change the feel of how you play the game. You may remember at the start of the video, I mentioned how I think the mod was made for a different kind of player in mind. I don't mean that in a way meant to knock the mod, after all I still like it a lot. But with the number of abilities that all feel very situational and like they're supposed to be used as attacks despite not being very useful as one, I get the feeling Meta Knight was partially made with a multiplayer audience in mind. I haven't played any SRB2 multiplayer, but I know there are a fair few modes where you are expected to fight other players, so I think with the number of attacks contained here, I'm sure some of them were designed to be used against other players. Despite that, he's still fun to play in single player, and I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. I hope you enjoyed the video, and ciao.